Hello and welcome, my name is Interjection, and in my previous video it was made abundantly clear to me that nobody liked the style of casting which I presented to you, and to be honest I really did not like it either. I was just trying something out since I was watching somebody else cast a different game and I really enjoyed the way that they were doing it. It worked for them, but I do not think I did as good a job as they did. It really does not work for me, and I found it actually much more difficult to do, so I'm actually going to not do that at all, and I will be going back to what I do best. Anyway, today I bring you another game of Age of Empires 3, obviously. This is the second game in the best of 3 between Phoenix and SoldieR for Round B of PK Clan Tournament 4. Wow, I said that quickly. Anyway, I will just point out that the British player is getting hunting dogs at this market, but in the previous game we saw Phoenix, of course, winning as the British, has chosen to play British again. Of course, you are not penalised for that if you are playing a European civilization. Non-European civilizations are penalised, however. If you win with a non-European civilization, you cannot play that same civilization in your next game. You do have to change, but of course Phoenix playing British, so is allowed to stay as the British. SoldieR, however, was playing Germans. He lost and has switched to Iroquois. He does not want to lose this game, since if he does, then he will be eliminated from the tournament, since he will have lost the best of 3. Of course, you only need to win 2 games to, of course, win the best of 3. Therefore, losing 2 games, you are out. Iroquois is considered to be a much more powerful civilization than most of the other civilizations. Some would argue overpowered, since, of course, they do have some very powerful options open to them. And it is a very tough matchup for the British player. He's going to have his work cut out if he wants to do well here. Now, I will point out that the Iroquois player also getting the hunting dogs upgrade, and this is because both players start with a market opt. On Saguenay, you do start with a random economic building. I was going to say military building, but that's not true. You start with a random economic building. Can be a market, can be a livestock pen, can be a mill, can be a plantation, whatever you like, those kind of things. But since they both started with a market, a very good idea is to get hunting dogs, since it is a very cheap upgrade and you already have the market. Why not? It gives you a nice bonus to your economy early on. Of course, the Iroquois player did have to collect some wood to get that, whereas the British player did not, since, of course, the Iroquois player, the first thing he did was build this trading post here, and that's a very standard thing to do as Iroquois. He used all of his starting wood on that, since he does have a travois, not this travois, a different kind of travois, which transforms into a longhouse, or any other building you like, though a longhouse, generally speaking, is the one that you do need early on, so most players will build a longhouse early on. I do not think we give enough respect to travois men. I think we should pay more respect to these kind of people. Travois men are very good. Anyway, we'll switch over to Phoenix, and in this matchup, he has only chosen to build the one house, did that last game, and to be honest, he has done that in every other game that he's played in this tournament so far. Though in this game, it does make a lot more sense, since of course Iroquois do have a very powerful rush, and you do have to be aware of that. If you build a second house, that would mean you would need to collect some more wood, and then that would slow you down to age 2. Of course, a free settler from fully constructing a manor house is nice, but you don't want to get too anally shaft-packed by tomahawks. That is not nice. You do need to get up rather quickly. Here we see Phoenix adding in a wall. Surprises, surprises. He does this every single game, and in this particular matchup, well, I guess it works for him, but a wall can be circumnavigated rather easily. It is kind of dangerous things to do, since it is very expensive. You have to remember that each segment that I am clicking on is worth 5 wood, and that really does add up. Of course, you could be spending that wood on manors, which is arguably a better investment, but, you know, for Phoenix, it works for him going with a turtle with a shell included. Of course, most British playstyles are turtles, though I do not think a lot of people realise that. You're just not building a wall. You do not have to build a wall to turtle. Anyway, we'll switch over to SoldieR, but before we do, we see Phoenix going up with the governor. Surprise, surprise, he does this every game. SoldieR here going up with the messenger, and that means, of course, he can train 16 settlers. They do start with 1 less, of course, only get 5 settlers, so it is kind of like going up with 15 settlers and then using the age up fast option, getting up to the colonial age very quickly. Of course, clicked up a lot later than the British player, but still reaching here, reaching to the colonial age before him. He has received a Travois man for free, since you do get a brand new Travois man each and every time you age up, no matter which politician you do choose. He's going to place this forward, and it looks like he wants to be aggressive with it. He has a few options open to him, though by the fact that he is sending 5 settlers as his first shipment, what I'm about to explain is not what he is going to do. But the Iroquois in this matchup can be very, very aggressive. They have a GG button on their town centre, which wins them. No, it's called a big button. It costs 500 food, and it's called the Iroquois Scouting Party. Grants you 5 tomahawks from your home city. They can also send their first home city shipment as either like 7 Aina, 4 Kanya, 6 tomahawk, whatever they like. And they can also train 5 tomahawks or Aina, whatever they want, at their forward war hut. And they can kind of combine all of that for a very strong early push. But, of course, he's not doing that. That is one thing he can do, but, of course, not doing that. Another thing he could have done was send 4 Kanya horsemen and then do a little bit of raiding and, of course, play the game from there. But actually going for a semi-fast fortress by the looks of it, of course, 5 settlers gives him a nice economy, followed up by 600 coin. Of course, Iroquois do not have 700 coin. They do not have 700 of any resource. They would be such a strong civilization, even stronger than they are if they did. So he's kind of, that is kind of one of the limiting factors there, but still, you're going to use that coin to get up to the next age rather quickly, and then, of course, with this decent economy that he has built, he will then be able to train some nice military units and also ship them and have a little bit of a later push, but still a very strong one, and kind of win the game that way. I suppose that might be his intention. Of course, we'll switch over to Phoenix now and talk about what he is doing. His first shipment, I imagine, would have been 700 wood. Yes, it was. He's now sending 2 caravels. Of course, with the 700 wood, he can build a lot of manors, as you can see here. Going to get a free settler from each and every one of those, which is nice. His second shipment is 2 caravels, and on this map I can understand why. Normally you might send 5 settlers if you're going for a full boom, but against the Iroquois, of course, since they can be very aggressive, and they will have a very, very strong push when they do finally decide to push out, if done at the optimum time. 5 settlers, you're just not going to have the kind of the military to defend, so I guess you might see something like 6 musketeers, which he does not actually have in his deck. But here, sending 2 caravels, looks like he has intentions of taking the water and has built a dock to do so. Might start training some fishing ships, though I doubt he will train any until he's sent the schooners card, since that does decrease the cost of fishing ships by 60%, makes them cost 40 wood instead of 100. 2 caravels here. It's surprising in Age of Empires 3, really, that boats are one of the best counters to land units in the game. Of course, these have a broadside attack, which of course does 50 damage per shot, and they do several shots in that time. Of course, as you can see, it's being used here to take out this war hut. The war hut does have a very strong anti-ship damage, but anyway, so I was saying, these caravels can be used to defend, since they do obviously have that broadside attack as you mentioned, but also have a ranged attack of 75, which does straight up bombard damage. So of course, things like cavalry, which might resist ranged attacks, or actually, well, whatever, any unit that resists a ranged attack isn't going to resist a bombard attack, since they, of course, is not ranged damage, it is bombard damage. It's a different thing entirely. So yeah, the British player now sending 5 settlers, going to continue the boom, and of course any fighting that occurs on the coast he can very easily defend with. These are much stronger than 6 musketeers. Using them to kind of bring down this forward war hut, and why wouldn't he? Of course, he's seen no aggression from the Iroquois player going up with that semi-fast fortress. Of course, the Iroquois player wanted to place this forward so that once he gets to the fortress age, since he's now aging up with the wise woman, which will grant him a bunch of crates upon aging up, he could use that forward war hut as a spawn point for military shipments and also start training units. Ideally, he would be training units right now from it during transition, since of course he does have the resources stacking up. In his last game, one of SoldieR's issues was that he was not really, I don't think he displayed very good, resource management. Here, does have a lot of resources stacking up, and we might see that again, but you have to appreciate the fact that his war hut did go down, and therefore he cannot spend them. He's going to have to replace that building. Building on the coast, though, was a silly idea, really. Of course, you'd never want to build it on the coast, since, of course, that can happen since boats, you always have to be aware of boats. Boats do, obviously, good damage, and if combined with a land army can bring it down. It might have been a better idea to build, therefore, the war hut over here, where it is not near the coast at all. The Iroquois player, also building his trading post in the center, which I also might add is not great either, since he did go for the semi-fast fortress, isn't going to have the military to kind of defend this until a little bit later on. If he built the one in his base, that would have been much more difficult to defend, though building one in the middle does mean you get XP sooner, since of course the Traverse Man will pass just as the building goes up. I will take a look at the shipments he sent. 4 settlers. Okay, so going for a very boom-heavy here. So obviously, of course, sending 3 settlers, followed by 5 settlers, then 600 coin for the semi, and then followed up with 4 settlers. So having a nice economy. Of course, 31 settlers here. We'll look at Phoenix, who is on 37, not that much further ahead. And of course, SoldieR will now have those more powerful military units, which he has access to since he is in the Fortress Age, and also those military shipments, which are quite formidable. We'll see how this works out for him. And of course, the British player choosing to be quite aggressive here. Well, pushing out at least, not really being aggressive, but since he's seen no aggression from the other player, he knows that SoldieR has a Fortress Age agenda and won't have military for a little while, so has come in here to do some damage whilst he can before, of course, SoldieR's army will be up. We see Phoenix, though. His card order was, of course, 3 settlers, followed by 700 wood, followed by 2 caravels, then 5 settlers. He then sent schooners and is now starting to boom on the water, as we see fishing ships now in production, and this is where his economy really is going to get going. Of course, SoldieR has given him the opportunity to take the water, and we'll take a look at SoldieR's Fortress Age capabilities, water capabilities. Okay, has none, doesn't have any boats in there. Forgive me, I'm not quite sure if Iroquois gets schooners. I think they do, but, you know, doesn't have that in there either. Anyway, his first home city shipment, 6 Kanya horsemen, has arrived. So this is the time where he needs to push out, of course. Has a decent army now. And though he would have a larger army if that, you know, that first initial war hadn't gone down, since he could have trained a few more units. But this is where he's going to have to push out. Of course, he has more units backing him up, which are being trained as we speak. And also more military shipments will arrive. Unfortunately, he did lose the trading post, so they will be slowing down. In this matchup, though, if we take a look at it from the British player's perspective, British just hasn't been pushed at all for almost 11 minutes, and his economy is going to be so big. This is the issue. You cannot let British play like that for so long. The score is very even, and that is because, of course, SoldieR is sending these military shipments. Of course, 6 Kanyas. We'll take a look at how much these cost. They cost 100 food and 75 wood, so each Kanya horseman is the equivalent of 1.75 score. And of course, now sending 8 forest prowlers, a forest prowler is worth over 100 resources as well. That's over 1 score. So these military shipments are going to keep his army, keep his score afloat, going to keep it, of course, very competitive and even above the British player's score. You'll see that when, of course, these 8 thingy-majigs arrive, the elite forest prowler. If the Iroquois player is going to win this, he needs to push very soon. Of course, as I say, you know, British has taken the water, and anyway, even without the water, British do a very big and a very good job of booming. So, of course, not going to want to leave him alone for too long. We'll switch over to the British player, and he has now sent 700 coin. Therefore has intentions of going up to the Fortress Age himself, as we can see, clicking up with the adventurer. Okay, so these pikemen going down. Lost a lot of those. Perhaps he didn't see them. It looks like the longmen are going to go down as well. I think he's going to garrison them in the caravel so that, of course, they do not get slaughtered. Of course, they would. Very risky to be fighting out here. Of course, he does know that the Iroquois player has reached the Fortress Age. And by the 12-minute mark, if he's shipment spamming plus training units, he's going to have a big army. And of course, his army, his own army, isn't going to be able to deal with that. He has a wall, which he can more easily fight behind a wall. Let the Iroquois player come to him. Though any fighting done on the coast, the British player has a big advantage, since of course he does have 2 caravels, and those do very good damage, well, to units. And it does mean he can just garrison his units, of course, in the caravel itself. I do think SoldieR, come on, push. I think he just needs to push in. Of course, right now he does have the score lead, and his army is bigger, and it can do a lot of damage if it were to, of course, push in. The British army is a little bit smaller, though it is behind a wall, and it is one of those kind of units which does have a really long range, so of course he is able to kind of defend quite well, I suppose. Here now coming in to siege down the wall, and he's going to take, you know, quite a few shots, since of course these longbowmen do outrange most of his units. The only units, of course, which can shoot over the wall are, of course, these ranged ones. The Elite Forest Prowler, which do have a long range. They are a very long range unit, but longbowmen just go further. We'll switch over, well, we are on SoldieR right here, and as you can see, these shipments sending 5 Canyon now, and his next shipment isn't going to be for a while. These are slowing down, and of course, as each shipment arrives, the next one requires more experience points, so that, obviously, of course, it will take longer to arrive. So, his push, of course, the earlier you push, I guess, the stronger it's going to be, since, of course, it will be backed up by more frequent military unit shipments. Anyway, putting these units into the hidden mode so they cannot be seen. And it looks like he's going to try and get up close to the British player's economy, of course, these settlers here, and switch back into ranged mode and be able to snipe a few of them dead. Going to try and do a little bit of damage to the British player this way. Now getting out of there. Of course, the longbowmen are going to shoot at him. Anyway, we'll switch over to Phoenix. And here we see Phoenix has just reached the Fortress Age, went up with the Adventurous, so got some more Longbowmen, gonna continue to mass Longbowmen, and now upgrading his Longbowmen to, obviously, Veteran. Here we see Veteran Longbowmen, and at this barracks, Veteran Pikemen. Also sending the Yeoman upgrade like he did last game, and in every other game he has played in the tournament so far. Yeoman increases the range of Longbowmen even further, so they have even more range. They have the exact same range as a Falconet. I did say that in my last video, but this time I can confirm that you can quote me. I was correct, and of course I am correct this time too. Not that that would change, but we'll switch over to SoldieR again. And here we see a lot of resources stacking up once again, and I think it's been long enough. We can't just blame it on that, of course, forward war hut that went down. I think his resource management needs a little bit of work. His macro, of course, isn't so good here. Though you can spend those resources quite quickly as Iroquois, I believe, with the Iroquois Scouting Party. Of course, you can send that for 500 food, gives you 5 tomahawks, and then you can send the Iroquois Raiding Party, which gives you, I believe, 10 tomahawks for 500 food and 500 wood. And then there is a third one, which is also available in the Fortress Age, just like the previous one. The very first one I mentioned is available in the Colonial Age, but the next two, of course, was it Raiding Party, and then War Party, the final one. 500 food, 500 wood, and 500 coin for 15 tomahawks. So that is one way of spending the resources. And I think he could do that, and then, of course, have a nice big mass to push in. But we see the British score starting to take off here, and since these are now veteran Longbowmen, and he has upgraded them to, of course, with the Yeoman card as well, it's just going to get tougher from here for SoldieR. Looking at Phoenix, now shipping a frigate, going to give him some even larger control on, of course, the water. But more importantly, it means he can push out here. Anything from the Iroquois player along this coastline is going to be... It's just going to be so hard for him to do damage against this army, since it's backed up by a frigate and 2 caravels, which of course have special broadside attacks, which do a ton of damage. Here we see the frigate coming in, and it's going to use its broadside attack. You can see many a cannonball coming out of it very quickly. I believe it's not actually in range. It's trying to get in range, but can't. Anyway, switching over to SoldieR again. Here has the Iroquois Scouting Party in queue, which will start after that settler. Getting elite tomahawks, of course, since he will be sending Scouting Party, followed by Raiding Party, and then War Party. The, of course, elite upgrade is similar to the veteran upgrade, gives him a 20% bonus to attack and hit points. Of course, that's all very nice indeed. Another way he could spend all of this food is by training Aina, though it's not... Since you are in the Fortress Age, of course, you can then train Elite Forest Prowler, which are essentially the same unit, and get the elite upgrade for free, whereas Aina aren't such a good unit. They are more like crossbowmen in a sense, whereas Elite Forest Prowlers are more like your skirmisher, so why would you then choose worse units over better ones? Anyway, here the pikemen coming in, of course they do a lot of damage. Now that they're veteran, that's 9, and then with a ×5 multiplier versus the cavalry. So here he's going to try and use his elite tomahawks to kind of kill off the pikemen, and then of course the canyons will be able to get into combat with these longbowmen and bring them down. There won't be anything therefore to protect them. But you see, of course, Phoenix keeping the pikemen back, doesn't want to bring them too far forward. He doesn't want them to take unnecessary shots, and they're only really coming into play here to of course do damage against the cavalry. But I don't think he's doing a great job of keeping the pikemen near the cavalry to kind of protect his longbowmen. I have seen better unit micro, I must admit. Perhaps Phoenix is out of practice. And here we see the longbowmen, they're going very far forward again. Of course, it'd be nice to bring them back behind the longbowmen, since there are no cavalry that are threatening them. And, pikemen really don't do any damage to units. They only have 9 attack when upgraded to veteran. But, the only thing they are really any good against is, of course, cavalry, since they do have that ×5 multiplier. Here, most of SoldieR's resources is disappearing. So, of course, now choosing to train a lot of Aina. Perhaps you'll get the elite Aina upgrade, which will give them 20% more attack and hit points and bring them in a line with, of course, Fortress Age kind of unit standards. Switching over to Phoenix, though. And he's putting up 2 barracks a little bit forward. I think the fighting here, obviously it went well since he won, though I do think he could have lost less units if perhaps his micro was, perhaps if he was being more attentive. Now sending 2 cannons, and with those I think he's going to be able to do a lot of siege damage. Of course, cannons are fairly good against buildings, by no means the best unit against buildings. Certainly mortars in the next stage are even stronger, though since those don't really do any damage to units themselves, mortars cannot attack units, then it's probably not the best. No, not this is relevant, but the point is, yes, Falconet's going to be able to do some damage here, and I think, you know, Iroquois, one of those civilizations that struggle against cannons, since their only counter to cannons is really Kanya horsemen, and horsemen are really easily brought down by stuff like pikemen. Of course, you know, the soldier as Iroquois doesn't have access to things like culverins. There aren't, you know, those kind of artillery units that do bonus damage against other artillery. They don't even have artillery themselves until they reach the industrial age, where they get light cannon. But he's not in the industrial age, so yeah, I'm going to struggle there, I think. Here comes the cannon, and he's starting to... Okay, so I thought that was a barracks, this one here, but it's actually an artillery foundry, and it looks like he's going to pop up, you know, a fair few cannons coming out of that now. For a while, Soldier did have control of the map, and of course that gives him a big advantage since the British player confined into his base. The food on the water does not last forever, and you know the fish will run out, and then you have to switch over to collecting from just whales, which grant you, you know, a coin source, not food. And then there's no hunts in his base. The only way he'd be able to collect food is from these huntable animals. So, you know, earlier he did have control of that, and that would have made it difficult for the British player. So we see him popping up a mill. That is a really logical placement here, of course. Great placement to put the mill outside of your wall. Here we see a ton of cannons, and I do think that this could end very badly for him indeed. He really does not have a lot of pikemen there to protect them with. Though, of course, if he stays close to the shoreline, that shouldn't be an issue, since he can just pop them inside a caravel or a frigate, and then they won't be able to be attacked. Now sending 8 settlers, are going to get very far ahead, and take a look at his resources. Not that many stacked up at all, whereas we compare it to Soldier, has 700, almost 800 wood floating around, and 1.2k coin. Now sending, that I believe was the Iroquois scouting party. Raiding party is up next, and hopefully you can get that out. Sorry, war party is up next. There it is, going around now, and hopefully he can get that out before this town centre goes down. As you can see, there's a lot of cannons, and he really is pushing into him hard. We'll take a look at this guy's army. And he has, of course, a decent amount of forest prowlers, and of course now a decent amount of tomahawks as well. I think his army does kind of rival the British player, but since he has no real counter to the cannons, I think, as I say, he's going to find this difficult. I will just tap the play fast button just to speed this up a little bit. Looks like the fight is about to get going. And I'm going to switch over to the British player for this. Here we see, of course, the Kanya horsemen coming in, and there are no pikemen around those cannons. Really, he needs a lot of, you know, a lot of pikemen up there, or at least his pikemen are over here. What are they? Oh, Soldier. Sorry, Phoenix. Really, are you just going to lose all of your cannons? That is horrible. It's like, okay, never mind. Of course, he is vastly in the lead with his economy, and I think this is a big setback, but oh, it's nasty. It's really messy, that fight there. Of course, you know, losing this when really, if he'd been able to sit on his cannons and keep them protected, they would have absolutely just eliminate every single one of these Iroquois units. And now this Iroquois player is in a position, well, in a better position than he was. Certainly could push out again, though the British player's economy, of course, able to replace these units very quickly. We see even more cannons being trained. Now sending refrigeration. After 8 settlers, just a full boom here. You know, all of these late game kind of upgrades which stay forever. Of course, the 8 settlers going to give you a more permanent bonus to your economy, and then refrigeration increases all food gather rates by 20%. Whereas if you compare it to Soldier, his upgrades have just been military shipments, which give you that one-time military advantage. And I don't think he's you know, been able to use that one-time advantage to push out. Though he did do a good job of killing the cannons, I must admit. And as we can see here, if he can repeat that, you know, there's only a few pikemen there, then he could bring down, you know, these represent 500 resources. That's 5 score per cannon. Here, of course, plenty of tomahawks and hyena, and those pikemen out of position. If he can start to bring them down, then the Kanyas will have no problem killing off all of these cannons again. And if he can do that again, of course, now 8 tomahawks on the way, perhaps he can push back into the British player's base, stop him from collecting the wooden coin here, and maybe cause some issues. I mean, perhaps, I'm speculating, I will just tap the play fast button again just to move on a little bit. here a second bit town centre being added in, and I really think it's going to be impossible to get, obviously, the British player off the water. Of course, he doesn't have any kind of water cards in his deck. Perhaps he picked the wrong deck, I don't know. Of course, players usually do have a water deck, which they can choose if the map is a water map. But town centre has a, anti-ship damage of 75 here. And also there are plenty of boats on the water, so, well, I don't actually think SoldieR has any intentions of taking the water. Take a look at the score, though. It's not as drastic as you might think. Phoenix is ahead by about 60 points, but probably would be a lot further ahead in terms of score if those cannons hadn't died. Anyway, tapping play fast button again here. We see the 5 Renegade French veteran cuirassier shipment arriving. Of course, it costs 500 coins, as I say, and it gives you a few heavy cavalry units. Perhaps he can repeat the cannon massacre again. There are 3 more, and I must admit this is the worst cannon protection kind of management I've ever seen. Here we see more cannons coming in to just eliminate these cannons, and really the pikemen are all on this side when honestly they just need to be next to the cannons. You have to be so careful. I mean, British with this kind of economy this late in the game can just bounce back, but if you're playing as, let's say, Spain or Ottoman, and you don't protect that 2 cannon shipment in a fast fortress, it is just GG. But here, Phoenix taking the win, a very macro-intensive build and coming out on top with his economy. As I say, I think SoldieR's main issue here was not pushing in early enough, or perhaps he just didn't feel that he could. Perhaps he didn't think he could get past that wall, and for that reason, never actually ended up pushing and then got overtaken by the British player's economy. But thank you very much for watching, everybody, and do please leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it, and if you didn't enjoy it, then dislike it. I'll see you next time.